It was only 95 days ago when we announced the aquarium gallery for the first time. In that video, we walked around an empty building and I kind of gave you guys an idea and tried to give you a visual of what was to come, including walking around a pretend aquarium that wasn't even there yet. Now, we don't have to pretend anymore. Not only is the aquarium built, but it's filled with water. This is a concrete aquarium. The walls are 8 inches thick. It stands 4 feet tall, 10 feet long, and 7 feet wide, holding about 2,000 gallons of water. I'll have a complete tutorial on how I built this entire aquarium shortly. With that said, the aquarium is now filled with water. I've also brought it up to temperature. Basically the temperature I need to stock it with my fish. The tank's only been filled for about 3 days now, and I'm gonna fill it and let it sit here for about a week. Go through a water test, make sure there's no leaks or anything like that, which is what you should do with all very large aquariums that you just built. You wanna make sure that before you stock it or aquascape it, that it's not gonna leak. I'm telling you, you don't wanna scape the tank as well as stock it, only to have to drain it all and move the fish. Between you and me though, I don't think this is going to leak at all. Let me go ahead and show you what I've got done this week and what's to come. The filtration and plumbing is basically done. I've also installed all heaters as well as the in-floor heating, which we'll get to in a minute, and what I'm doing to monitor the flow rates on that. However, you can see right here, this is all the power strips as well as the power adapters. I like to put them in a bucket before I run the tanks, just in case there's a leak. Everything's protected in this bucket. Once I've confirmed there's not any leaks and there's not going to be any, I'll arrange final placement. I'm most likely going to bolt a lot of this to the wall so it never actually touches the ground. The sump is completely finished and I've already tested running it. However, the drain portion is quite loud and I got to figure out a way to silence that. I have a few ideas and I'll have that done shortly. This is a tankless water heater and it's what's responsible for heating the aquarium. If you guys remember, we ran some PEX piping underneath the aquarium itself, embedded into the concrete, and it zigzags throughout it. The way this works is hot water is constantly being heated up on here, and there's a tiny little pump in here that will turn on and start circulating the water into these pipes that go underneath the aquarium. And there's a little sensor in the aquarium that's going to sense the aquarium's temperature. When it drops below the temperature, all this does is turn the pump on and circulates the water. When the water reaches the temperature, it shuts the pump off. It's very simple. I was able to raise the aquarium 12 degrees Celsius within 8 hours. And that sounds like a relatively long time. However, once you get your aquarium up to temperature, that's the hard work. Then it takes far less energy to maintain that temperature. I decided I want to make sure I know the water is flowing through it and how much water and how many gallons per hour and so forth is flowing through it. So I cut into the pipe here and put a little flow meter here. I got this all on Amazon, relatively cheap. I think it was like 10, 15 bucks. And it's just a basic inline flow meter. Again, I'll clean up all the wires and everything else in the coming days. As you can see, the water is now pumping through the aquarium. We have some Ecotech MP60 wave makers in. Currently, I'm just testing 1 on each side. I'm supposed to have 4, like 2 on each side. However, these are pumping 7,500 gallons per hour. I also hooked up the Ecotech Reef link, and I gotta tell you, that thing is awesome. I can control absolutely everything from it, and when I get good at it, I'm gonna show you guys a few things about it. Like I said, I'm only using 2 of the wave makers, and right now they're just on a pulse mode. Basically, they shut off and then slowly ramp up and shut off again. It does that for about 16 hours a day. Then at nighttime, I've got it down to constant mode, which it's just constantly blowing the water instead of doing this. However, I'm only running the power heads or the wave makers at about 35%. Basically give the fish in the aquarium a chance to rest and not be blown around. But how does all of this work? Well, first and foremost, these are all of the inputs. I'm not finished with them. On the inside, I still have to add some grates to make sure the fish don't get sucked up. Right now, it's just 2-inch 90-degree elbows on the inside of the tank. Water's being sucked in through these pipes here. On the other side of the wall, it comes through all of this soft plumbing. And the first 2 pumps, these are the new Vectra M1s. They pump about 2,000 gallons per hour each. They go through this large canister filter. Canister filter then returns the water out of this 1.5-inch pipe through this 25-watt UV sterilizer and back to the aquarium. Water then comes out of the middle pipe right here. There's 2 more returns though, and I'm going to explain those. Another one of those drains comes down to this other Ecotech Vectra M1, and that's pumped up through the sump. Water's going to flow up through here, flow through this sponge to be mechanically filtered, and then overflows or pumps through those holes there. This is going to be filled with biological media. You guys will see that shortly. A lot of you guys are asking me, how are you gonna cycle the aquarium? And I've said it a few times, I already have over 100 liters of cycled media that is going in this sump. So this tank is going to start right off from the beginning, cycled, so I can add fish almost immediately. We'll talk about when we add the fish in a minute. After biologically filtered, the water flows through this last chamber and goes down through this drain pipe where the heaters are also going to be. I have a bunch of these 500 watt heaters that are going to supplement the in-floor heating in case, it gets a little cold in here or whatever the case. I want to make sure that the temperatures in here are consistent. But having such a large volume of water, I need to be able to back this aquarium up with a ton of heating power when needed. Water then comes down out of the bottom of the sump through this 2-inch pipe and returns out of the far left 2-inch return. Like I said though, it's not turned on right now. I still have some work to quiet it down. It's quite loud. It's making some sucking noises, and then on this side it's bubbling. I don't want to have that. I want it to be as silent as it is in here right now. And as you can see, there's no noise. Then we have this last overflow right here, and that's exactly what that is. That's a 90-degree overflow. The water level will always stay at that overflow. Unless I put in a pipe, I can raise the water level in the tank. Right now, we're just testing things. However, the purpose of this is directly related to how I'm going to be doing my water changes. And how will I be doing them? Technically, I won't be. I told you guys before, and I've done a ton of videos on it, on these drip systems. Basically, this is a 20 PSI regulator. It's gonna regulate how much pressure comes out. When I turn this valve here, water can begin to flow out of it. All I have to do is attach an airline hose, run that to the sump, and that's gonna constantly drip fresh water into the aquarium. All that extra water being added to the tank is clearly going to raise that water level, and that's when this overflow kicks into play. Now, drip systems technically don't change the water. They work on the process of dilution. Basically, if you take a glass of water that's dirty and continuously pour clean water into it, all that old water is going to overflow out of it, and eventually that water is very clear. That's kind of how this works. However, the water is going to overflow through this pipe, which is connected to a hose that comes through the wall, and then basically overflows into this utility tub here. Again, things are just roughly put in here, so I just have a clamp there holding it in place, but you get the idea. But does that mean I'll never have to do water changes? Well, technically no. But what it does mean is that I won't have to do them nearly as much. Essentially, it's going to prolong them incredibly far. Instead of doing, say, a weekly water change or a big water change every other day, I'll only have to do a water change maybe once a month or every other month. It's going to depend on the parameters of the aquarium and, the waste and what's produced inside the tank. For me, it takes a few months to get to know an aquarium and what's best for it, but once we get on a proper schedule, I'll know exactly what it needs. However, based on the sheer volume of the aquarium, a drip system typically drips water in slowly. This is probably going to need a constant stream of water, which isn't that bad of a thing because being in Canada here and my frost line being about 4 feet into the ground, and that's where all the plumbing's coming from, that means that the water is always going to be running at least to a certain extent, meaning that it'll be even more difficult to freeze my pipes. So a few more things to be hooked up, including the battery backups, which was interesting. When I was connecting the Reef link, I realized that when the power goes out and we go to battery backup power, I can run all pumps at like 20% or 50%, and it'll all be automated, which will prolong the life of these battery backups, meaning I'm gonna get more life and a longer time period before my power goes on, so I'm not gonna have much to worry about. But let's not forget about this plug here. You see, this little bad boy means that I can run the entire building on a generator when needed. Now, I've shown you guys this before, however, putting the building on a generator means when the power goes out, I can select which pieces of equipment and which supplies I wanna have running. I won't run the hot water tank, I won't run, certain things. But when that happens, I select what I want, turn them on or off, and then switch the generator feed over. Basically foolproof, which is a good thing for me. So a few more odds and ends to complete with the aquarium. Very small stuff, basically not even a day's work. However, let's talk about the fact that the tank doesn't have a cover. You guys will remember I use the polycarbonate greenhouse panels that are really cheap, flexible, indestructible, clear, etc. I've talked about these before. I could basically take them all off at once, put them into a little pile, and put them back on the aquarium. Now, I've run the tank for a few days with these lids on it, and I'm excited to say that even at the temperature I need it to be at, the humidity levels in this room have not changed whatsoever. I'm also happy to say that the heat pump that heats the entire building here doesn't have to turn on nearly as much because this now acts as a heat sink. Now once we have this entire room filled with aquariums, it's going to become even more energy efficient, believe it or not. Okay, let's talk about what's to come. When are we going to stock the tank? When are we going to escape the tank? Let's get a timeline together. Well, basically, I've got to do another big water change on the aquarium just to make sure I remove any dust or anything that got into the tank. That's always a good idea when you've built an aquarium for the first time. You can fill it up, you can bring it to temperature, do whatever testing you want to do. However, at the end of the day, you should do a large water change just in case there's any impurities that got leached into the aquarium. So I got to do that. Maybe I'll do that today or tomorrow. Since the tank's been filled for 3 days, I'm going to give it another 4 days before I add fish. Possibly only another 3 days. We'll see. Before I add the fish though, we have to actually scape the tank. Now all of that Malaysian wood is all been soaked. It's been pre-soaked for almost a month now, and it's ready to go in the aquarium. So to begin, I'll be able to add in the driftwood, but as for plants, it'll be a little while longer because I'm undecided on the lighting yet. But I do know a lot of you are asking me if I'm going to be using this pendant light which lights the room, and the answer is simply no. That's not going to grow the plants I want to keep. So today or tomorrow I'm going to drain about 50% of the water. While doing that water change, I might even scape the tank as well. Then we can start adding the fish. Now originally the plan was to add the rays first. The rays being added just in case the arowana gets settled first and he doesn't like new fish being added to his tank. Although with the tank being so big and so tall and he's going to be up so high in the water, the rays will be so low in the water, I can't see there being any problem. However, the problem with the rays adding first is that all of the cycled media is being run on his tank in the sump below. So he might have to be added first so I can transfer the media over and then the next day or so add in the rays. But I don't know, I got a few days to decide and I'll get back to you guys on what I do. Most likely this coming Sunday you guys should see the tank aquascaped as well as the fish added, and don't worry, I'll be recording all of that as well. Anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. I'd also like to thank you for watching, and if you're as excited as me about this build and you're not subscribed to this channel yet, I highly suggest you do. A lot of exciting things to come. Oh yeah, I'm also adding the flower horn to the 2000.